And it like it like speaks to the bloodlust that lives within every man and like how deep
Yeah.
that is to humanity.
And we are live, just so you know. Yeah, I think that's part of why
Mm.
people like stuff like this, debates.
Maybe, maybe. I
I
mean,
mean,
we're
you
not
and
like.
I specifically are obviously not doing it in like a,
I think that's why people like the like Ben Shapiro
yeah. Yeah,
destroys.
and like
I think that's different.
all over Twitch, there's like so much of that. But no, I mean so don't you think you have that same instinct too? You just don't you
I
don't think
do.
you should gratify it that way?
I don't think you should gratify it through sports. I think it feels more transparent to me in sports. It's like
Hmm.
we are the Giants, we are the Packers. Like,
Yeah.
we're gonna beat you. Oh, we
Yeah.
crushed you guys. It's like it just feels very, yeah, very easy to like see through to me.
What about the competitive side of it? You don't like the competitive side of
I
it?
love competition
Yeah.
though. But that's not competition when you're watching someone else do something.
Oh, okay. You don't like
So I
watching
need
competition.
no,
Yeah.
I need to have like a personal stake in it. So I play sports, you know that.
Yeah.
When I'm playing sports, I get extremely competitive, and the best way to motivate me is for like someone else to wrong me
Yeah, I
in some
bet,
way. Like
dude.
if I get fouled and the ref doesn't call it, like I'm playing my best game ever.
If I was on your team and I needed to like pump you up, I would like go over to the ref and be like, "All right, don't call the next foul on him."
Yeah, it's
um,
not good for anyone.
there's some good competitive chess on. Um, Magnus and Fabiano are actually playing today. They're like it's like the eighth round of a big tournament in the
That's
Netherlands.
cool.
Yeah,
What type of chess are they playing?
classical. So nice
Which
and
how long do
slow.
they have to move?
I think it's like the games last like 5 hours. The time controller like they start with like 2 hours, and then after 40 moves they get like 40 minutes. After the 60 moves they get like 15 minutes. So the games are long. Um, but yeah, Magnus lost two games in a row like a few days ago, which hasn't happened since 2015. Two classical games in a row.
Oh,
Um, yeah, but yeah, no, I get that. You know, I guess I watch sports. I watch them more than I used to. I watch them mostly out of like I guess boredom. Like I find it entertaining. It also kind of pumps me up to like exercise, which is cool.
hmm.
Um, but yeah, I just like games. I find it fun.
I would
Um,
say whatever you can do to make sure that you exercise, even if it's something really stupid, even if
yeah.
it's listening to like junk music or watching a stupid video, something that like the other side of you would normally like scoff at,
Mm,
always do it because the benefits of exercise are so outsized.
it's true. It's true. Trying to do that more. It's my 2023 goals. As this is our first one of 2023, do you have any resolutions? Any New Year's resolutions? Is it to admit when people, beat you in debates more often, or yeah, what were you sort of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, if it happens, I didn't have the opportunity in 2022.
No, did
I
you
don't
have
do
any?
New Year's resolutions. It's so
Yeah,
arbitrary. We went around the
yeah.
sun again. Let me say a new thing.
Of course, it's arbitrary.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, for me, I want to exercise more. Just do more of the things I already want to do. I've gotten more organized with some of my creative stuff recently. I want to do more writing, like not for YouTube, which is going to be
Mhm.
fun. Um, and yeah, I'm afraid to just start watching Breaking Bad because I don't want. I don't. I have to do something else first. You know what I mean?
Do you feel like that's going to consume you?
Yes.
Yeah, it will. You're going to have to make videos like
Yes.
the people. Do you feel the demand from like your people now?
I feel a demand mostly because I've like gotten on board with watching it, so now I feel like it's a demand. But someone gave a good suggestion, which is to make like one big video, and I think I might do that. I might just do one big video,
Don't do that. That's a bad idea.
but I don't want to sign on for another like 6 months.
Your videos are already big videos, an
I
hour
know.
long video, or that's a huge YouTube video.
That's true. Maybe it doesn't have to be crazy long. I just have other things I want to talk about, but I don't. It's not pressing. I don't know. It might be like a few months before I make another video or something. But
Is it profitable? Like, is it worth your time, or are you paying yourself like $1 an hour?
It's somewhere in between that and profitable. It's like my video that has the most views. I've probably earned like 2 grand, and that's in like 8 months or something. So I mean that's good. That's definitely
It's
that's
nice like side money, but it's
yeah.
not like a full-time gig.
No, but it's definitely nice side money to the point where like I've gotten used to it, and I keep reminding myself like, whoa, this is crazy that I get multiple hundreds a month from YouTube. Like
I was listening to Mr. Beast on Lex Friedman's podcast, and he said that during Christmas, some of the top YouTubers will get $30 to $40 per thousand views.
right, the cost, the revenue per whatever goes up because advertisers are paying more for some reason around that
Because
time of year.
people make more purchases
Yeah,
around that time.
yeah, that's
And they also they put more ads on YouTube and
do
on
they? Yeah.
websites in general. Yeah.
Well, that's wild. Yeah, he's the YouTube guy. He's got it all down. Um, well, just since we were talking about the love thing when we went live,
Unconditional love.
unconditional love. So I mean, it might just be like semantics a little bit. Because when I think of unconditional love, I definitely like it has to be not toxic. Like I don't think like doing anything for someone that you love is what I call unconditional love. You know, like doing whatever they want you to or something. It's not That's not what unconditional love is. Or like letting, what I guess I should ask this. What to you makes unconditional love toxic? Like what is
The existence of unconditional love, I would say, opens the door to toxicity and
like
leaves it wide open. It's not that
toxicity, like controlling manipulative behavior or something, or
that for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, it says that people can treat you however they like, and you will still treat them with love because that love is unconditional, without condition. They don't have to treat you well. They don't have to respect you. They don't have to be nice to you.
Yeah.
They don't have to respect your personal autonomy. Nothing.
Yeah.
It's
So
unconditional.
I just like I totally feel where you're coming from and I agree, but I don't call that unconditional love. Like I would
What do
say
you call it then?
well, I would say if I have unconditional love for someone and they actually mistreat me and I tell them and they don't respect that and they keep doing it and I tell, I'll give it a few shots or something depending on how bad it is, obviously. If it's really bad, you maybe don't give them any second shot or something. But I think you can love someone from afar in that case if you need to like protect yourself if they're actually harmful. I do believe that. That's I think a relatively that's the less common situation. I think more commonly what unconditional love means is something in that gray area where like people do some things that you don't like, but it's not like to the line of like abuse. And like your unconditional love maybe takes the form of like I guess what I mean is there's nothing about like unconditional love that I think of as like passive and like not being yourself or not speaking up your mind about how you're being treated. There are no conditions on like so I don't know if maybe we've talked about this in therapy. We have unconditional love, but we don't say love because that would be unprofessional. So it's called unconditional positive regard, which is funny, and like it's like a therapeutic concept that you have to have that for your client. So even if they've done horrible things, like we need therapists to be able to help people who have done
Yeah.
horrible things. So it's different, obviously, with family. You're not in a professional capacity, but yeah, I don't think of there as being anything passive. So if like, I don't even know if I necessarily believe in unconditional love. I'm just saying, like, in that concept, to me, it's not like passive. I don't know if that. I think it's an ideal. I don't think we can like live up to it all the time. I don't think that's something we can do.
Unconditional is just it's extreme. Maybe you believe in like very enduring,
Yeah.
like durable love, love that can be resilient in the face of adversity, but unconditional, I think is just too extreme to be a practical concept.
Well, I don't believe in unconditional anything. I don't think. I mean, but it's like the
Unconditional gravity.
I does that mean it's more than the normal amount, or
No, just it's without any conditions, like gravity exists.
but not
So
if
if
you're
you
in a spaceship.
no, it still exists.
But it's different. That's that's a
No,
metaphor for unconditional. You
no,
don't
no,
feel
no, no,
it.
no. It still exists. You do feel it. It's just not large enough
Oh
of
well,
a force to.
if you're on a different planet, there's different gravity.
No, gravity is like gravity from every object in the universe is acting on you right now.
Yeah, but if you're on another planet, you're saying that's the exact same conditions of gravity?
No, like yeah, the law of gravity still applies. You
Like
might feel a different gravitational force. This is definitely arguing semantics.
I think it's the same. I think it's the same. I don't know. I feel like it is analogous in a certain way. Like I don't know that, like I don't think people have to, like, what's the view of unconditional love that would be most useful to a person's life in like a practical
A
way?
parent is gonna still love their kid even when they're being a little shit and
Sure.
still vow to take care of them.
And vice versa. Sometimes, I mean, I don't know, not all the time. Not
Nah,
I don't believe in unconditional, like you have to be
it
nice to
doesn't go both ways.
you
It just
don't think.
can't. It just can't. When you're like the concept of being born is so trippy. It's like your existence begins with this extremely traumatizing event that you didn't ask for, and then you're just yoinked into existence and you
Yeah.
have to exist. That is
So,
not something you have to be indebted in emotional, like in an emotional debt to your parents for doing when they chose to do it for themselves or by accident.
yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think of myself as like owing my parents something because of the birth. I think of it more as like what they did after the birth.
I see I see things I guess in terms of money maybe more often than most people do, but like it feels like a debt that you can't pay back.
Yes, it is. That's a very good way to put it. And I think that's true of a lot of our relationships. You cannot actually pay it back. I think there's some reason to try, but I think human relationships are so complicated, and it's like we haven't like cracked the code on like, how we're supposed to treat each other. So there's like infinite different theories on, how to do it. I guess we all just develop our theories based around it's what we think is true, but it's also like what is gonna work for us and make us most happy in our lives. I think that's true of our political views too. Um,
Speaking of politics,
yeah, yeah,
let's hit topics.
yeah, yeah. So
I should first can I first say
yeah, yeah,
our
yeah.
name is stupid because YouTube won't allow us or
Yes.
Twitch won't allow
Twitch
us to
won't
be
allow
called
us.
Jews.
Yeah, T2Gs.
Because that's I guess offensive.
But
Actually,
it's cool.
yesterday
Wait, what?
I I should have told you this. Yesterday I was talking to someone who's trying to sell their house, and they were talking about like people who had come to see it, and they were talking about the Hasidic Jews. For those who don't know, those are people who wear the hats and they have the payas.
The
There's more to it
Hackaz,
than
yeah.
that, but they're a type of Orthodox Jew. And long story short, when she said the Jewish people to me, she lowered her voice for the word Jewish. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I almost called her out on it. There was really a reality where I did, but I was like, it wasn't bad to say Jewish until you lowered your voice.
It's so bad, dude. That's so bad. I
Anyway,
like it's so funny how people do that. Like I mean, some people like don't know a lot of Jewish people and stuff, but like yeah, I mean that just goes to show like Jewish is used as a pejorative a lot of the time. Like this person wasn't, obviously,
yeah.
but because
Well,
it is, we take that in and we're like, it sounds weird to say Jewish. Like, or obviously you and I don't feel that way, but
I think that was like pejorative, not
oh,
intentionally,
oh,
but like there's like
yeah.
a subconscious element of like, you wouldn't want to call someone Jewish, would you?
Yeah. I guess I was giving them the benefit of the doubt and saying like it's used pejoratively, so people like internalize that and feel like it's almost like a slur when it's
Oh,
not.
I see. I
Yeah.
see.
So they like speak it under their but yeah, I mean she like this person knows you're Jewish.
I guess.
Okay, no.
I, I,
Maybe not. Yeah.
she definitely should. Yeah, she definitely should.
That's
There's
so
no
funny.
way I could imagine she wouldn't, but
So
I don't know.
the first thing, I just since I watched the whole video about it yesterday, what's going on with the whole Steven Crowder thing? What is your take on that? Because
Oh my god, it's so stupid.
like,
I think
yeah,
my like hot take. I think Ben Shapiro is in a league of his own. apart from hard right wing conservatives in terms of intellectual honesty. And I
Okay.
know that that one maybe probably rubs you the wrong way, but if you're comparing him to some of the other people who occupy that space, I think his ability to like self improve, be more transparent about where his incentives lie, own
Mm-hmm.
up to his past mistakes, things that he wishes he wouldn't have said. I just think that he has more what's the word I'm looking
I
for?
think Ben Shapiro has way.
Integrity.
I was just gonna say, I think he has way more integrity than Steven Crowder, and I think like I disagree with Ben Shapiro about a lot of things, but like I think he's definitely like less of a grifter. I think he's like a guy doing his job that it happens to like disagree with me, and I don't, I don't. Yeah, I think there might be things he's like not being honest about or not being honest with himself about, but like Steven Crowder for sure, like you watch Steven Crowder and you're like, he's completely full of shit. Like literally completely full of
He's
shit.
playing a character.
Yeah, he is
He's
playing
playing
it,
a
but
character for
he's
sure.
playing a character like it's like on a level where I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like there's like either he's not like he's become the character or like he's not in there anymore.
He
It feels
doesn't know
like
where the character starts and
yeah,
Stephen
and
Crowder
his
ends or
I
whatever.
think part of that is like his dad's his manager. Actually, Ben Shapiro might have his dad be involved in some way
Dude,
too.
he's put out a video like playing classical with his dad. Like
Right. Yeah,
I
that's
don't think his dad manages the Daily Wire, if that's what you
no.
mean.
His dad doesn't. No, he doesn't. I just know
I'm
they like
sure he's been
left.
influential.
Yeah, they like left Breitbart at the same time, right? I think they both worked at Breitbart and then left at the same time from
I
something.
don't think so.
His dad worked for Breitbart under a pseudonym, according to that video I made, where I looked at which like that seemed legit, but I could be wrong. But anyways, no, Steven Crowder legitimately and has like serious dad like issues. I'll just say like I made a video
How do
about
you know that?
because I made a video about Steven Crowder. I don't know if you ever watched it, and
No.
I actually, it was about this like COVID. He gave some rally, and then he did a video where he was like talking about how his like the media didn't report on the actual number of people at his rally, and he was trying to like blame Governor Whitmer in Michigan for like COVID and blah blah blah. And it was this whole thing, and I found it really interesting, and I analyzed it and stuff. But I went off on this whole tangent because I found this Facebook post where he was like basically just wishing happy birthday to his dad, but it was like super long. And he even went into like how strong and his dad is and like how he looks up to him for like physically strong. And it seemed like the type of thing, it was like, dude, that's like an unhealthy, weird relationship with your dad. So look up like Steven Crowder dad Facebook post because
That's actually exactly what I
yeah,
just Googled.
yeah, because I found it and then I took it out of the video. I was like, this is too weird. I'm like psychoanalyzing him on like too much of a deep level. This is actually
I
weird.
love your really weird deep
But
dives.
but there are times where I don't want it to get that personal. Like if like it was
Hmm.
like too personal and I'm like I'm actually like criticizing him as a person right now and I don't even know him as a person and it feels weird. But yeah, you can find it definitely. But anyways, I sorry, that's a completely separate. Their relationships with their father are not the main thing I meant
I
to
just
talk.
skimmed it. It seemed like actually a pretty genuine
Yeah,
like
yeah, it struck me as bizarre at a few points. There might have been
the
things about.
physical aspect that you're referring to looks like he was punching above his weight class in jujitsu tournament. So he was like proud that his dad was doing more with
that's
less.
that's
Whatever.
cool. Fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough. Fair
So
enough.
you
But
asked me for my take on
yeah,
it, and I
yeah.
instead told you I think I respect Ben Shapiro, which
No,
was
I
not what
think
you
no.
asked for.
That's an interest. No, I see where you're coming from though. But yeah, like obviously Steven Crowder was offered an extremely good deal, and
He didn't think so. He was
yeah,
offered a deal.
he was offered a deal that, as far as he admitted, it was good in almost every aspect except this like one thing where like if you get demonetized.
Let me summarize it
Yeah,
if I may for
yeah.
everyone because you
Please,
guys are
please,
gonna have no idea what we're talking about.
please.
Steven Crowder, popular YouTube guy, 6 million subscribers. Ben Shapiro, popular political commentator, slightly fewer YouTube subscribers. The Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring's media company, right wing conservative media company, offered Steven Crowder a media deal. I don't remember for exactly what. I think he was going to like speak at stadiums or something like that. $15 million over a few years, something like that. And it had a clause in this contract saying like if Steven loses YouTube followership, we are not going to pay you as much. So it was hedging, right? In the
Yeah.
contract, they're saying like we wanna protect our downside. We're offering you all this money, but if you break your foot and you can't play baseball anymore, we're not going to pay you anymore.
Yeah.
Fairly standard.
Yeah.
Steven Crowder then takes this angle either as a grift or he really just like felt um, offended. Not totally sure.
No.
He takes the tact of, oh, this is big conservative, aka the Daily Wire, siding with YouTube and other large media companies who would like to cancel me. And so if I get canceled, I'm also going to lose my money from the Daily Wire. And so now he's playing this public victim card, airing the private terms of the deal, throwing Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire under the bus. And it's created this really weird chasm that no one was asking for between the conservatives, I guess, if you want to call Steven Crowder that. And Ben Shapiro, I think, is actually genuinely hurt. He was he was Steven Crowder's first lawyer, as he likes to say often.
That's so
Yeah, you didn't know
funny.
that?
No,
He
I did
helped him
not.
negotiate his contract with Fox when
Wow.
Steven Crowder was first getting started.
No, I did
And
not
they've
know
been
that.
friends for years, as
Yeah.
have Jeremy Boring and Steven Crowder. And
Yeah.
they both feel just kind of like backstabbed for no reason. So they're not sure if like Steven's trying to just do this for like a cash grab. Is he trying to position himself? It doesn't seem like someone with like stable mental health. It doesn't seem super rational,
It
I
doesn't
guess, from an
seem
outside
rational.
perspective.
Yeah, and I agree that you can't tell whether it's a grift or genuine at all because it has some like the genuine side doesn't make as much sense because it's just like I mean,
No, it doesn't.
like you're expecting them to change their contracts to what exactly? Like
He could have also just said like, I don't like this offer. I would like to counter with a different offer, which would be
yeah,
very standard in
yeah,
contractual negotiations
yeah,
without making it public. So I guess you can, if you want to analyze this ad nauseum, you could say like, what does he stand to gain by publicizing this?
yeah.
Is he gonna maybe get more subscribers? Is it gonna be worth it? Considering that he won't be like, I don't really don't understand it. It almost looks like a coup of two evenly matched parties of in terms of their size, except the Daily Wire
Way
is
bigger,
larger for sure
way
by
bigger.
a
Yeah,
lot. Smaller YouTube presence, but
yeah,
the Daily Wire has many more different like tendrils in multiple different
yeah.
things. And tendril sounds ominous,
No,
but
they're the
it's an
biggest
accurate
biggest on Facebook. They're the biggest on like multiple platforms for sure. They're huge.
bigger
Yeah.
than Fox on Facebook.
I think it probably changes week to week, but I
Huh.
definitely when I looked it up, the Daily Wire was like consistently way at the top or in the top 5 regularly for clicks and everything on
So
Facebook.
the
Yeah.
oh go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
on Facebook and probably other stuff. But yeah, what are you seeing?
The so my take on this is like it looks it's very strange and in no dude Fox is way bigger,
Okay.
like 20 million, 24 million people on Facebook, and like Daily Wire has like 3.7,
What for like views or something or clicks?
just like people who follow
It
that on
might be
Facebook.
it might be different if you look up actual like views or clicks, but it doesn't. I mean,
Huh,
it doesn't matter. They're both big. They're both big. But yeah, certainly
okay,
Daily Wire is bigger than Steven Crowder in like a
for sure,
general way. Yeah, and they're
for
like a
sure.
huge business. Yeah, and they were
What's
going to produce
super
a show. I think I don't know. Maybe it was live shows too. I don't really know. But
okay, I just heard live shows.
yeah, maybe
Frankly,
not.
I've been more focused on a lot of more interesting things in the
Yeah,
news. I feel kind of stupid for even being aware of this, but
totally. No, I get
it's
that.
close. I listen to Ben Shapiro all the time, so like I
Yeah.
guess I feel like I should know about it a little bit, especially since he talked about it on the show. Whatever. I'm not gonna think about it too much. It's weird. Steven Crowder definitely likes to play this character of like the manly man, like afraid of no confrontation, self-made,
Yeah.
wears unironically, partially ironically, like wears a double holster for his
Yeah.
show. It's like partially ironic, like a
Yeah.
little tongue in cheek, but he does it every day. Like it's
Yeah.
serious to some degree. And the idea of playing, like positioning yourself as this victim where a business deal didn't favor you in your terms and then airing it like that and burning bridges with your friends in the process is a pretty anti-conservative message. It doesn't resonate very well with a lot of the conservative fan base. You
Yeah.
kind of look like a weenie, I guess, for a lack of a better way to
Yeah.
say it. And so it's odd, I guess, to me as a impartial observer. I really don't give a shit what happens to either of them. Why would he pull something like this?
Hmm.
Is there something to gain monetarily? politically?
Yeah.
Is he just feeling unstable? Is he feeling small? Is it like him lashing out because he doesn't like feeling like he's under the thumb of someone else? Does he have someone in his ear, like an Alex Jones type figure who,
Or his
like,
dad or something. Yeah.
yeah, maybe.
I'm
Anyway,
just
that's
saying because
sorry, that's my hot take.
yeah, no, I and I'm just speculating that because I wonder yeah, is it like what could convince him to act this way? But it really is interesting the way you describe, like, yeah, he has this whole like fake masculinity act, which is weird, and like he seems like he's like I can't think of a better word than like a dandy. Like he's a dandy. Like he likes like dressing up and being like funny and silly.
Andy? I don't
It's
know what
just
that
like
is.
an
Is
old
that like
fashioned like
metrosexual?
no, I mean I don't even think so, but yeah, I guess he's like he likes just like dressing up and playing characters and being like weird and silly, but he has to wrap that all in this like masculine thing. I don't know. I think he's like I think what's interesting is like I've been thinking about how masculinity, I think the healthiest definition of masculinity is it's adulthood for men. It's not about what separates masculinity from femininity. It's what separates masculinity from like immaturity, I guess, is what I think of like the most healthy definition.
Just sounds like adulthood.
Yeah. And I think masculinity is like what adulthood looks like when you're a man. And I think like this is a good example of like the difference between like actual maturity and like performing some weird fake masculinity for, for
Mm.
clicks or something like that. Um, I don't know, because I feel like if you define masculinity in contrast from femininity, it's like you just run into I don't know, like how do I know this type of issues that like yeah, I know people say, oh, women are like this, but then you don't know if you're separating the social from the natural, I guess, in a lot of those situations. But he behaved like a child, and it's probably going to turn a lot of people off because he's outmatched, and his tactics are weird.
One unique difference that I think a lot of people who really don't consume either of these people's content might not be familiar with. Tell me if you think this characterization is right. Steven
Yeah,
Crowder seems like he does. He's like very comfortable doing like setting up power imbalances, I guess you could say, in his confrontations. For example, like with college students,
hmm,
to make him look really good and powerful and like smart. But my take is that Ben Shapiro, while the names of the videos that he puts out are similar, like big crushing small,
yeah,
he interacts with people on good faith and actually encourages people to disagree who disagree with him to come up to the front of the line and ask their questions without interrupting them. Like truly does want to give people who don't agree with him the platform to tell him why they think that, and then he wants to, in the marketplace of ideas, prove why they're wrong. Whereas I get
yeah,
this feeling that Steven Crowder is like a little bit more of a bully, I would say, of
yeah.
like trying to prove he's right, and he's more willing to use like the situation that he's in to create a successful like win condition for him. Whereas I think Ben Shapiro is more comfortable with his ideas winning the day, even if you disagree with him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I
I
totally
think he's
agree.
more well read as
I think
well.
he's totally way more well read, way more intelligent. I think like Ben Shapiro, I would say is wrong about the stuff I think he's wrong about because society has lied to him and taught him false things. Whereas Steven Crowder is wrong because like maybe like he just like picked up a few things here and there to be wrong about because it was like useful. Like if that makes
Like
sense, like there's
like
less
Candace Owens.
yeah, like there's less, and I think I mean, I don't know. I don't watch her enough to even know what she actually
Me neither.
believes
I
or thinks.
can't.
Yeah, she seems like she probably believes what she's saying to some extent, but is I don't know. I don't even know. I don't want to speculate, um, but yeah, no. Stephen Crowder. It seems like I really just have this image of like it's like he's getting a script. I mean, he's an actor. He's a comedian. It's like he's getting a script and he's like, okay, like yeah, that's great. I can do that. That's gonna be awesome. Whereas Ben Shapiro, like actually to a deeper extent, believes what he says, and I don't. I think that's yeah. I don't agree with him still because I think he's still
let's
spreading conservative propaganda. But I mean, it's
let's
like,
talk about some
yeah,
of those. Why
yeah,
don't you use our gigantic platform to tell us why or what some of the most egregious things that you think that Ben Shapiro believes and puts out that
sure.
are harmful.
I mean, I know. I just think conservatism is like false and flawed. Like I mean, I saw him say that he thinks, like like health insurance, like access to health insurance through like subsidized health insurance, is a bad thing and sort of creates it restricts demand in healthcare, which causes prices to go up, which I don't think is true. I think that subsidizing healthcare increases demand for health insurance premiums and makes health insurance premiums go down. I don't know whether it makes actual costs go up, but I don't think that there's proof for that. And I think that when I heard him make the argument, he didn't take into account people's premiums going down through competition by having subsidized healthcare, making private companies have to say, oh, we have to provide better healthcare to compete with the government option. Ideally, is how it works some places. I think. I don't know. I think I don't watch him enough, honestly, but I've certainly watched a lot of people like debunk his arguments. I don't know if he changed his mind about the things since then and so on, but I don't know. Isn't he like there are two sexes and you have to be one or the other? Is he like a traditional male woman roles guy, or am I making that up? I don't know.
Uh, Maybe you should clarify your position more before I like.
Like a guy who's like, oh, like men are supposed to act like this and women are supposed to act like this and they're only men or women, and I get that sort of traditional vibe from him. Does he not?
I mean, he's an Orthodox Jew, so yeah, for sure.
Well, I think if you can't separate your like religious views from your politics, you're gonna have like fucked up politics. In my opinion, I mean, yeah, I don't care. I don't care if you're what religion you are. I think you can't extend your religious views to politics because inherently you're stepping on other people's freedoms. I think inherently when you do that. I didn't realize his religious views even inform his politics all that much. I guess that's obvious that they do, though. I mean,
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, he doesn't think other people should live by his own religious views,
oh, okay.
but I don't think it's possible to be an Orthodox Jew and not have some semblance of the idea of like women have different roles in society than men do.
Yeah, I just think that's super restrictive. I mean, in 2023. And again, I don't listen to his show, so I don't quite know like how much he cares about certain things nowadays. It just seems like and like, he does have that like unstable power imbalance, debating college kids, or he used to. But I agree with your point that he actually wants to prove himself right to like a fair-minded observer, like I guess, period, or certainly a lot more than Steven Crowder. Um, but no, I don't agree with conservatism. I don't know like he consistently comes out with the weirdest takes. Like I feel like even there will be things like a shooting will happen and he'll like not want it to be like politicized. Like he's one of those guys too, who's like don't talk about gun control after a shooting or something. Or am I wrong about that? Or I don't.
Oh, he's definitely said that before.
Yeah, I hate that type of thing because it's like this is the exact time where we should talk about stuff and why. I don't know his views on guns or whatever. I'm sure they're permissive, but I don't know. I think he just strikes me as like a run of the mill conservative, I guess. Whoa, we just got a follower. Um,
Well,
ex,
like a bot.
executionality JSF. What up? Welcome. Um,
That sounds like a real person.
yeah. But yeah, I don't know, man. I guess I can't give you a great answer because I don't mean to just like speculate about what I
That's
think he
fine.
says.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Let's change topics. Let's
All
talk
right.
about fusion.
Yeah, you mentioned fusion. I'm like, I don't know how helpful I'll be to this conversation, but yeah.
Are you apprised of what's going on in the fusion world a little bit?
No.
Damn. Okay.
Do you mean like fusion, like physics fusion? Like the
Yeah.
Okay, no, I don't know what's going on in the
You thought I
fusion.
meant like Asian fusion? Like, dude, did you hear about that delicious new
I
place down
thought
the
maybe there
road?
was like a company. Wasn't there some company Fusion GPS? I was like, maybe there's some company Fusion.
Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah. The Yes.
I
No,
don't
that's
even
not what I'm
remember.
talking about.
So what's going on with
It's really
fusion?
funny.
They discovered some new type of fusion or something, or
Big breakthrough. Same type of fusion. Very big milestone in the goal on the road to establishing fusion as a viable energy source
oh
for our
wow,
society.
that's awesome.
I'm going to try to be as succinct as I can about this.
No,
There's a
take your
lot
time.
of people that are talking about it, so feel free to go Google some stuff out there. For any of you that are more technical, Real Engineering, the YouTube channel has a fantastic video on how Helion is doing fusion at the moment. But that's not where the amazing breakthrough, I guess you could say, in the last couple of months was. So the whole goal of fusion is to take two light elements, fuse them into one heavier element, and then release a bunch of energy in the process.
Hmm.
You capture some of that energy. As humans do, we like to boil water with that energy, and then we get electricity out of it.
Hmm.
The byproducts of it are extremely easy to manage. It's not like burning coal where you have to deal with soot, carbon in the air. It's exceptionally clean. There's very minor radioactive products. It's not like blowing up a nuclear bomb.
Hmm.
If we could crack this nut and make this sustainable, like actually do the physics of this in a real way, large
Yeah.
scale, human beings have infinite energy for the rest of humanity. Period.
Hmm.
Everything that you could imagine that requires an infinite amount of energy is viable. So,
Really?
yeah,
So
it's
the
incredible.
I'm sorry. Obviously, I don't understand the details, but
You're good, dude. You're
the
good.
parts that you're fusing together are not infinite, though.
That's true. Yeah, but they're so abundant that they may as well be.
Okay.
Um, usually, I think tritium and deuterium, isotopes of uh, hydrogen, I think, are what you're going to be using, and hydrogen's the most abundant element in the universe by
Huh.
far. Um, the raw materials are effectively infinite.
Wow.
Um, you familiar with the E equals MC squared equation?
Yeah, I've heard of it. That Einstein guy, right?
Yeah, so this equation actually like governs the relationship that we're talking about here. When
Oh.
you're fusing together different nuclei and you're creating one heavier one, the difference in mass from before and after becomes converted to pure energy
Oh,
following the
okay.
equation E equals mc squared,
What's C?
the speed of light,
Oh, right.
which is
Uh,
just kind of wild. That
yeah.
makes sense. But uh, the amount of energy. So if any of you are good with numbers, speed of light is gigantic.
Yeah.
Um,
Very fast.
very, very fast.
I've
Yeah.
noticed that. Yeah. Like,
Three
look.
times 10 to the eighth for any of you following, but it's
Look at how
huge.
fast I.
Um, huge amount of energy is basically what this means. So if we could really have fusion, we don't need to have solar panels. We don't need to have petroleum. We don't need to have wind. None of that matters. Um, Fusion reactors would be extremely costly to build, but well within the budget of what the global GDP spends. I think global GDP is like $130 trillion or something. I mean, think about the implications of having unlimited energy for the entire globe. There
Yeah,
are
I'd
people
take it.
in like India and Africa that are burning dung, poop
Okay.
for heat in certain areas.
I don't think we need to look to foreign countries. I mean, but yeah, I see your
I
point.
was just gonna say, like, think of the quality of life improvement
Yeah,
for
yeah.
these people who could go from like, I don't know if I can heat my house
Yeah.
with feces to I have unlimited energy. I mean, you can't really fathom how big of a step change that would be for most people.
Well, the bigger change would be ideally that climate change would be slowed down. I mean, for me at least. Or
Maybe.
you don't think it
Yeah, I
would?
don't know, maybe.
Well, then what's the point? I mean, if it's not even going to slow down climate change, there's no point. I don't.
Have you seen the show The Expanse? Probably not.
Nah, I haven't.
Just like the idea of having accessible fusion technology, it just like changes the game.
For
You like
sure.
so like Kardashev. You ever hear of that
No.
guy? There's like something called the Kardashev scale, and we like to classify our society by like what political system are we using, and like is our population growing or decreasing? But like the concept of classifying a society based on how much energy you can command seems like a more useful way to talk about society. If we're thinking of it on like an interstellar scale, you don't give a shit.
No, I think the only useful way of classifying a society is the like gross national happiness like type of measure.
Happiness.
Yeah.
Who
What's the
cares
point?
about happiness?
What's the point of human life?
There is none. There
Exactly.
absolutely is none.
Exactly. So you might as well be happy while you're at it.
Dude, you'd be a lot happier if you could have like fusion powered shoes. Trust me. No
I
more
believe it.
Heelys.
I believe it. I'm just saying, I think all inventions should be in the service of that type of thing. And I think this type, yeah, I mean, this sounds great. I just, I'm obviously skeptical that it would be as good as it sounds, I guess, that it would be as available for people. It seems like it,
Sounds too good to be true.
yeah, well, for sure, but I don't want to be like a negative Nancy, but yeah, it does sound too good to be true, but
We're still far away from it.
well, and in a more realistic way, like I just feel like wouldn't that be like first that would be used by the most powerful countries, and then would it be available for other countries? How would that become available? How would that energy become available? Would it be sold at the highest price possible, or would it be available for poorer countries or poor people or whatever? Um,
Good question.
yeah, it just seems like every good thing like this gets warped as long as we don't have like the structural issues worked out. Like the like I guess it would be fission, right? Would be the one that led to the atomic bomb. Is that right? Or yeah, it's like that was an amazing invention, and then it led to the atomic bomb, and it
It's
still is
not
an amazing invention that works for
worth
other things.
worth noting that fission is much more easily weaponizable than fusion
That's
is.
that's
Fission
super
wants to
interesting.
like
Yeah,
build on itself.
yeah.
Fusion is like kind of this hard to keep state.
I
Anyway,
don't
the
I don't mean to
breakthrough
be
itself
negative. This
was
this is very
go
cool. Yeah, yeah.
go
No, I
ahead.
think this is very cool. It's always like how is this going to be used type of thing. But yeah.
The breakthrough was Q factor was greater than one, meaning that the amount of energy that was put into the reaction was less than the amount of energy that you got out of the
That's
reaction.
crazy.
Now there is still way more energy consumed by using these lasers to like heat up the
Right.
actual point of fusion. But if you just like draw the circle around the fusion itself, it
Right.
was a positive energy
And you
reaction. So
scale it up
you
and
have to scale it up exactly.
but that's
A
that's
lot.
interesting cuz so they like created energy out of nothing basically.
Out of mass, they converted
Out of
mass into
mass.
energy.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Um,
no, that's
it, it,
extremely cool.
it would be amazing. I
Yeah.
strongly recommend anyone listening to this, all two of you and you, watch a video on like how they're doing it. The science behind how they're doing it is fucking incredible. But
Yeah.
they basically have the physics of it down.
Wow.
It's now more or less an engineering problem of like
That's
making sure the site you can scale up and like how do you build this on a commercial scale.
And then it
It's amazing.
becomes a policy problem. Or like, yeah, how much do we encourage this versus other things? But I mean, obviously, like fossil fuels are way more, likely to run out than, or like certainly they're more
There's only
scarce.
so many dead dinosaurs in the ground.
I don't know how scarce they are, but they're certainly, not forever.
I'm excited about it. So
No, I'm excited. I don't mean to
that's
be
what I'll
not
talk about.
excited. I think that's great. I'm always skeptical of like I guess like I wouldn't you're not doing this. I'm not trying to say you're doing this, but I wouldn't want to like hinge my hope on like things getting better in X, Y, and Z way. If that follower we had is a Doge scammer. My bad.
There's a bot.
It's a bot. But yeah, I don't. You see it sometimes with stuff related to climate change, like carbon capture stuff like that. It's like I don't know the science. I just am always skeptical about like one thing sort of resolving this complex problem or something like that. You going to dogehype.com? Is that what you're doing?
I was looking to see if I could get some free Doge coins.
Nice.
I didn't find any.
That's unfortunate. Forget how to delete messages.
Who's gonna win in 2024? Do you think?
Who's even
presidential.
running, dude?
Oh yeah, right.
I literally don't know who's running. Like on either side. Okay, Joe Biden's running, right?
This is more of like a trot, but yeah.
And then is Trump
You,
running?
you want to talk about the files thing? Do you care
Sure. I
about
don't
that?
know what. So what did these files reveal? I didn't look into it.
Just that he had classified documents he wasn't supposed to have, and he was
Oh,
keeping them like in an unsecure location in his
yeah,
garage. And there's a very clear parallel to
yeah,
Trump, who has been under fire in the mainstream media for a long period of time for being like, no, I don't want to give you my documents back.
right.
Mine. And it turns out Joe Biden was doing it. Sounds like Hillary Clinton was doing it on her email server. Probably every president that has ever existed has been doing this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
the I think point that some folks are trying to make, and I would agree with them, is it doesn't seem like the weaponization of these findings has been pointed equally at all people. It seems like the threat of criminal or public perception proceedings definitely follow a specific political narrative.
Why do you think that is?
Because the Democrats control the media, bro.
Do you think that the Democrats actually control the media, or
I do to some extent. Yeah. I mean,
the?
I don't like, I think that political actors overwhelmingly in the Democratic Party at the moment have an undue influence in the types of stories that are shared and not shared. And I think the Twitter files have very clearly delineated that.
Why do you think Democrats wouldn't want like Joe Biden to get caught doing this?
Well, I think maybe it'll be politically expedient to get him caught doing this if they have the good replacement candidate. But in the context of Biden against Trump, I think it's just um, it was more politically expedient to try to malign Trump and not Biden if they wanted to put Joe Biden up as the DNC candidate.
So you feel like the New York Times and stuff like don't make as big a deal about this situation with Joe Biden compared to Trump?
For sure, yeah.
Is it the same type of files? I mean, the type of files certainly matters, right? Like,
We don't know. They're both classified.
okay. Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I thought I don't know. I don't know what Joe Biden was doing. I certainly won't. I'm not defending him. I mean, I thought the way Trump did everything with Mar-a-Lago was extremely grossly unprofessional from before he even got into office. Doing work at Mar-a-Lago was a terrible idea, and I found it atrocious and a horrible look for the country, and extremely dangerous precedent, I think, to have like dignitaries of other countries come to his social club and literally pay for memberships, pay for yearly memberships, bribing him. They raised the membership fee significantly when he became president. So I
He's
thought,
such a class act.
yeah, I mean, I thought it really like he really can get away with whatever he wants. And so can Joe Biden, and that's a bigger problem than either one of them. But I mean, for me, like a president like I don't care about Trump like taking files. It's not like that. It's the larger thing of like being extremely unprofessional with how he approached the office in almost every way conceivable. Joe Biden is like a little less unprofessional in several ways, I guess, but like I don't defend him. Obviously, this larger question of like is the media more harsh on Republicans or Democrats? I don't know, man. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of the media that is liberal, but it's not like left wing. I hope you can agree.
I
It's
don't
like
agree with that.
you think like
Maybe
the
it's not your brand of left wing. It's like
yeah,
American left wing, which to
yeah,
Europe is like right wing.
right.
And
And
I
so
I get what you're saying, but it's still, to me, it's left wing.
that's but I guess what I'm trying to
It's
say,
this is definitely semantics.
I don't want to just do semantics. I guess what I'm trying to say is like the the liberals, like the Democrats in the U.S., have a ton of shared like values and priorities with the Republicans.
I agree with
Yeah,
that.
the
So that's what
Democrat,
you mean by not left wing.
yeah, they're
Who
really like
cares? Who cares? It's a political faction that's exerting undue influence.
yes, and that's why I think when you say like Democrats are treated better than Republicans. I just think that creates a little bit of a false binary there. Whereas, like, I think it's more like stuff that serves the ruling class interests versus stuff that doesn't. And I think, like, calling out Trump does, I'm sure, I guess. But I think calling out Biden does too, because there's like different ruling class. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, Trump's like a character, and everything's going to get more clicks that he's involved in. So, but I believe it's the media less pushing an agenda and more wanting to make money and not do anything that will like terribly ruffle the status quo. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Thank you so much.
that was the one other thing I meant to say with the Steven Crowder thing is it's just interesting to me that like if he wasn't grifting, he doesn't understand like capitalism and like how like how contracts work. Like it's just like you don't have the power. Like your boss like gives you a contract. Every contract I've ever signed has been like stacked against me basically. And like maybe that's not always the case, but yeah. It's like so anyways, but sorry, that's going off topic. But yeah,
I should try to be more specific. I know I can hear myself. I sound a little bit like oh, the Dems control the media, blah blah blah. I want to not sound like an Alex Jones type character. I want to
okay,
be
yeah,
really
yeah.
specific about what I
Yeah.
mean. Hunter Biden's laptop story, I think, was a major news story, and it was breaking for probably politically expedient reasons at a crucial point during the last presidential election. It has now come out that actors within the executive branch of the government were putting pressure on Twitter and Facebook to suppress that story.
Okay.
That story could have influenced the election. Perhaps some sort of really bad news about Joe Biden and his son may have swung confidence away from him and maybe swung the election.
Mm-hmm.
When that kind of stuff doesn't get ousted properly and like vilified by MSNBC, CNN, Fox, everyone together, it sows distrust. And you see people who live in Appalachia see snippets of this story and go, oh, Trump's talking about the Democrats having stolen the election, and I'm not hearing CNN cover this story. I believe him.
Hmm.
And it actually creates distrust and it's doing real harm to not be covering this story just because it's not politically expedient to do so. And
Yeah.
this is where I put a lot of onus on companies like CNN and MSNBC to be more impartial, actually do journalism instead of political activism. And I know that the right wing does this
For
as
sure.
well.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they aren't culpable. This just is an example of in my opinion, largest story out there that should be covered about a sitting president, and it's
Yeah.
not getting the coverage that it should have.
So do you feel like they didn't cover the Hunter laptop story? Like what do you mean when you say they didn't cover it, I guess? Like
And I guess I'll have to pull up some specific resources, but the
okay.
Twitter files show that they were asking to suppress that story.
Oh no, no, and I totally believe you, and you don't even have to pull
Okay.
that up. Yeah, no, I should have spoken to that because that's the more key point. I think so. The government's like the government is interacting with social media platforms and to some extent moderating and controlling what they're doing. So
Moderating and controlling. Lab leak hypothesis was getting your post removed on Facebook.
right,
Full stop.
right, to say that the COVID came from a lab. So that yeah, I mean, I totally believe that. I obviously think the government does that. I
That's
guess
scary as fuck, man. That's
yeah,
to me that's really scary. Any sort of government infiltration into the media in a meaningful way, fucking scary. I don't want the government putting their thumb on the scales of journalism.
I hear you, but like, I'm not happy with the situation already before that, where it's like these outlets are owned by billionaires, and
The Rupert Murdochs, you don't like
yeah,
that?
and the liberal ones too. They're all owned by billionaires, and they do not have our best interests at heart at
I
all.
agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree
So
with you. My
yeah.
What I would say to that is like I'm not saying it's a lot better, it's just a little bit better. To me, having the government in control of that in any way is the worst possible case scenario. At least with people like Rupert Murdoch's, yes, he has outsized influence, extremely disproportionate amount of influence that you or I have.
Right.
You could say he's earned it. You could say he hasn't, whatever. The mechanisms that we as a society have to get rid of someone like him and put in someone else are much more flexible than they are for gigantic institutions like the government. The government wields a specific power with its monopoly on violence. It's very different when a society can turn and churn on someone like a Rupert Murdoch. You can't remove the FBI in the same way that you can say like Rupert Murdoch, like we're protesting all of your organizations because of extreme transgressions. It's
Sure.
just different in my
Sure.
opinion.
So if we wanted to create a world where the government, you know, either like which would you want more? Like the government to never, I guess, not exist insofar as putting their hand on the scale, or be more responsive to the public, or I shouldn't say which do you want more. Which do you think would also be more like achievable, like
Mm,
like getting the government to be more responsive to the public in terms of like what you're saying, like you can't replace people, like having it be so like the government's more
no.
accountable with what they do, and so they,
Mm,
if they do
I
things
want
that are
number
bad,
one.
they're held accountable, versus versus like having no say about what goes on social
I
media.
really believe, I know this sounds like to people who don't already agree with this sounds just like a conservative talking point, but I can defend it, I promise.
Yeah, yeah.
Small government is best government. The less power that they can wield, the better. If you choose number two there, door number two, where the government is more accurately and aggressively responding to the public interest, all it takes is a populist that you don't agree with to wrangle all of those resources and
Hmm.
point them in a direction that leads to immediate tyranny. And
Hmm.
history is littered with examples of this happening.
Sure, for sure, but all it takes to have like a no government situation be bad is like a monopoly. I mean,
Say more about that.
well, like that a monopoly creates that same situation where you don't have the accountability of like a corporation being responsive to the public. I mean, right? I mean, it doesn't.
I mean, do we need to justify like a gigantic? This is something you agree with, so I'm pandering.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
gigantic military and a gigantic um, social welfare state in order to have an antitrust faction? Like, couldn't we have an antitrust faction to break up monopolies without having every other service that the government
Sure. I
provides?
mean, that's an interesting point. Like you're saying, like antitrust is important and it's one thing we do want.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean,
Free market
sure.
doesn't work
Yeah.
in a perfect monopoly. It just doesn't.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
economics are very clear on that. And
Yeah.
if we want to operate on the scale that we seem to want to operate on, we must have antitrust.
Yeah, dude. And in favor of a smaller government. I don't think the government needs to be more powerful to achieve what I want it to achieve.
Most people say that too. But when you ask them do you want to cut this? Well, no, I don't want to cut that. Do you
Mm,
want to cut this? No. And you have this like arms race where every politician just wants to promise more. No one,
right.
so I'm stealing this from someone else, but no one
Yeah.
got elected to like class president in high school by saying like I'm going to take away the vending machines and like we're actually going to cut costs and no senior prom this year. The people who say like vending machines are free now, like they get
Yeah.
elected.
Yeah, no, totally, man. And I guess like yeah, I mean um but I am like I would be like if I was president, I would be willing to cut the entire military, like literally have no
I know.
military. But yeah, I mean, I do like I respect that you have that nuance that you're like, hey, this does seem like an important function. We need that function to be performed. Like, how's it going to be performed? I mean, because yeah, I like this issue, and we don't necessarily need to go into the details.
Yes, we do.
I don't like. So what's the big deal about Hunter's laptop?
Um,
Like what? I literally
okay.
haven't followed it. I don't. Yeah.
That's not what I thought you meant details about. Okay. My
I told you it
ineloquent way
wouldn't.
of
You
saying
wouldn't
it
tell me.
is Hunter Biden had what appeared to be an extremely advantageous position at a Ukrainian petroleum company
Right.
that he didn't seem qualified for,
Right.
except for having the last name Biden.
Sure. Of course.
He was making like very high end consultant fees, I think like 600K a
He was
year to
being
consult.
bribed by a Ukrainian petroleum
That's
company.
what the
Sure.
optics of it are. That's
I'm
certainly what it
perfectly
looks like.
willing to assume that's the case. Yeah.
Then having dirt on, aka this laptop that had like many videos of him doing illegal things,
Okay.
drugs, prostitution, etc.
Okay.
Having that kind of blackmail against someone who's that close to Joe Biden, a sitting political figure in American politics, it's a risk.
Okay.
It's simply like an exploitable risk. And you could perhaps have Hunter maybe steal a document here or there for them, or tell them
Whoa.
about a
This is now a
conversation
totally
he overheard.
different. Wait. Hold on. How did we go from they have shit on Hunter to he might be
Yeah.
stealing documents?
I think that having someone close to the government that could be compromised by something like that is a big story.
Well, this is exactly the same thing people were saying about Trump going to Russia in the 90s and them having
Yep.
stuff on him. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in
But
this
that got
case,
a tremendous amount of coverage, and
but
this didn't.
but in this case, it's Hunter. He's not even the president. So like we've all seen these videos now. We know he smokes crack and has sex with people and stuff. Like what
I think,
is
I
who
think the other discussion point was like him kicking up payments to the big guy is like one of the. It's doing a lot of work. That phrase that was found
yeah.
on the laptop.
So
Do you think like I want you to call me out and
yeah.
say like I really think you're just making a big leap here. Tell
No,
me
I
where you think I'm like jumping.
what is the leap? You're saying that what Joe Biden doesn't need money from Hunter or Burisma or whatever. Like he's got so much money. I'm sure he's greedy, but like I don't like he doesn't need that
That
money.
rich?
I don't know. I mean,
I do. I know where his house is.
oh no, I mean like I'm not going to be if there's evidence that Hunter was giving money to Joe Biden in any way, that should obviously disqualify Joe Biden from being president beyond the other things that should already disqualify him from being president. Like obvious. Yes, of course, but
Love that we do.
is there any evidence of this money going to Joe Biden? I mean,
No.
okay, yeah.
No, there was like the story that like from a week ago saying that Hunter Biden was paying his dad 50 grand a month in rent for his house. That would rent for like maybe 3K a month, but that's still in progress. I don't know that I
Yeah,
can claim that and
I
be
mean,
confident about
yeah,
it.
if that was like actually true, that would obviously be a big deal, but it has to, be evidenced. Like that would be really bad. And Trump did that with in all sorts of ways, obviously giving extreme I mean, Trump's nepotism with his kids I'd say was way worse than this.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, like way
It
worse.
was, but
Yeah.
that doesn't exonerate this guy.
No,
Like
it doesn't. It doesn't.
they can both be wrong.
But I don't here it's like this is like kind of run of the mill nepotism. I don't see what goes beyond like he's getting his son a position at a big company in a foreign country to benefit the family and his son and so on. But Trump actually put his kids in power in our government. They don't need to be compared because I get that they're totally different. But I don't get the hubbub around Hunter. The reason I'm comparing them is because I think the whole hubbub around Hunter is inherently a comparison. I think it is a projection and a response and a reaction to everything Trump did.
I think that's probably accurate.
So I mean, if it's still also bad, fair enough. I don't get what's even bad about it. Like, them having dirt on Hunter could be bad, but we all see that dirt. We all know what he's up to. Is that
Maybe
really...
I need to make a better case then.
And I don't want to blame you. I'm probably not understanding, but yeah, please feel free. Yeah.
Just listen to the Ben Shapiro show every day and then you'll agree with me.
What does he say? I mean, what's the big deal? Like, because it feels like Hunter, you just say Hunter Biden and people think, oh, and it's like it gets a reaction. Just, I mean, his name alone, Hunter. It's like something about it. I think it's like it's not. I don't get what the big deal is. Yeah.
But my Hunter Biden.
Like, what did he like? People
He's like a crack addicted son that's had a very troubled life, and
sure.
he's the smartest person that Joe Biden knows. I mean,
So
that's
that's interesting and sensational, but like, what's the who cares? I mean,
if the point is that people don't care. So if I'm steel manning that argument of like when people say but Hunter Biden, if the roles were reversed and Trump were still the sitting president and Hunter Biden were his son, the media would be a conflagration of of Hunter constantly. You would not hear the end of it because of his shady business dealings. But it's radio silence on him, and that's the story. So it's not that it's the biggest story ever to have broken.
yeah,
It really probably would have been like, huh, this is a pretty bad look. And then it would have gotten coverage and then been gone because it's like not like Joe Biden's being operated like a puppet by Russia. That's not what the story is.
right.
The story is that there was information to be covered and it wasn't.
But
That's the bigger story,
and
is the
that's
lack of
fair.
coverage.
And I'd like to. I feel like there's a lot there that maybe we could talk more about. But I also want to say like the story with Trump was that he literally could have been a puppet, and like after looking into it a lot, you still got the impression like I actually don't know if he's genuinely in the pocket of like not like foreign countries, let alone foreign corporations or whatever.
I don't think there's evidence of it, but I wouldn't put it past Trump.
Right.
Like I totally think he would be willing to
Yeah.
compromise all like ideas of integrity,
Yes.
which I think of which he has none,
He has no.
to
Yeah.
just benefit Trump. I would
So
not put it past him at all.
so I think there was a lot.
Why
There was
it's why I wouldn't vote for him. I just
for
don't
sure.
trust that the guy as I trust him only as far as my self-interest and our country's self-interest is aligned with his. As soon
Right.
as it's not, I I couldn't trust him as far as I could throw him.
Yeah. Totally. He doesn't have principles. He's not like he cares about values and stuff like
He
that.
only ran for president because Obama said like you'll never be
He
president.
insulted him exactly.
Do you remember that? You remember seeing that?
Yeah. Oh my God. He ripped into him. He was like, yeah, Donald Trump's like working on more important things, like who's gonna win Celebrity Apprentice or something. Um, yeah. I mean, so I think there's a point to be made that like there was more substance, and that's why
Mm.
like it was more of a heavy thing. But you bring up what I think about a lot, which is like there's this transfer of the conversation where, and you see this a lot with free speech, which is sort of what you're talking about is free speech, where it's like we're talking about one thing and then now we're talking about free speech, and people will say, well, it's actually free speech is the issue, not that original thing. So Jordan Peterson with pronouns, right?
Good point.
And
Good point.
you and I went into this last time, and I made the point of like, if it was about free speech, why make it about the pronoun? Or like, isn't it a coincidence that he also thinks there are only two sexes and genders?
I think you're making a really good point. It's a very nuanced point, but I think you can start at like an initial disagreement. Like I don't want to be compelled to use these pronouns, and then it can quickly stop being about the original issue,
Yeah,
and now it's about a meta issue
yeah,
that used this as a legitimate jumping off point to talk about the broader issue of free speech. So
yeah,
I think it's not necessarily like a debunk of the entire concept of starting with some concept and then feeling like you're really far away from where the original conversation talked about.
yeah.
I think it's a legitimate way that we work out issues within our society is by finding some sort of microcosm and then expanding it and extrapolating it to be more representative of our entire society.
Totally, totally. That definitely makes sense. I mean, I guess it's just like, well, if the then why don't you see, not to just talk about gender stuff, but like then why don't you see people who are like, oh yeah, gender is totally a spectrum and it's not fixed and not binary, but I think people should be able to intentionally misgender people as much as they want, and have that not be treated as as hate speech. Like, why do you not see people who are like, you know what I mean? Like, if the free
Yeah, I
speech
do.
issue, yeah,
Yeah, go ahead. No, no, go
if it's
ahead.
a legitimate free speech issue, why don't you see people take that free speech issue who don't have the gender issue?
I should say I have seen some people take that tact, but online, I mean, it's like I don't know any people that believe
Yeah,
that.
I haven't
Um,
even, but I believe it. I guess here or there. Yeah,
I would, you're not gonna like this, but I would
yeah.
say that people who have been, um, I want to say indoctrinated. I think you would want to say educated to understand that gender is a spectrum. Have such strong emotional attachment to that idea that the concept of free speech is secondary to people's feelings of personal validation and the harm that one could do by misgendering someone. It grossly outweighs the importance of free speech. I think that that's often the opinion that's taken. In order for you to have been convinced that there are
Right.
many different genders, that it's a spectrum, I think you also have to have adopted the ideology along the way that by denying people that sense of identity, you're putting them in harm's way.
But that's interesting because I don't see why those are inherently connected. Like for me, gender is not binary and not fixed because the closest thing we have to gender is sex, and that's not binary or fixed. So even if you say there's no such thing
No,
as,
but it's very close.
but it's not.
It is very close. Sex is very close to binary.
But it's not binary. Like you can say it's close, but it's not binary or
Heavily
fixed.
bimodal. Is that okay?
Sure, but it's not fixed or binary. It's not
Almost
fixed.
almost nothing is in this world.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean that there aren't very clear modalities from which we can start and base most of
for
our assumptions
sure.
on.
For sure. But what is that most of is doing a lot of work. It's like I think there are bimodal is fine. I mean but it's not fixed. I mean you're speaking to the binary part but not the fixed part. It's also not fixed in nature. Sex animals change their sex. I mean that
Some
happens.
types do, yeah.
Yeah. So to me that's the logical argument. It actually doesn't have to do with people's feelings. Like that's a social argument, but it's like there's a very clear biological logical argument that sex is not fixed or binary. So for me it's like why should humans put more rigorous rules on themselves than nature does? And then from that extends like there's this other belief that like if we're going to make people upset and bother them, there should be a good reason. And
Okay.
then and then those
Okay.
two
Okay.
yeah, and then those two beliefs go together and say, well, there's no good reason to make these people upset. If anything, they have the good reason on their side. So that's where I come from. And then the free speech thing, just like it's like I mean, it brings in other questions. Like I believe people have the right to say what they say, but there are also consequences for their actions. Just like if they were, saying like slurs or whatever. But yeah, what do you think of that argument? Because that is how I see it. I'm not just trying to say that like making it
I'm
up.
gonna forget a couple of the things that you said, so just remind me
Yeah,
of
no
some of the
worries. Yeah,
points that
yeah,
you
yeah,
made.
yeah,
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to respond to at least to one of the things
yeah,
that you
yeah.
said in a
Please,
moment.
please, totally.
There are animals in the animal kingdom that switch their sex, but they're doing it for a specific evolutionarily selected purpose. They are niche. Is it niche? Niche switching.
Sure.
They're trying to fit some sort of niche because the conditions of their biological survival have selected for that. So that flexibility is serving a direct purpose in reproduction. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist.
Sure.
Human beings doing it are doing it for some sense of self actualization
Mm-hmm.
because they're feeling like their sense of identity would be better actualized under a different sex. It's not the same thing.
Well, I mean, there are a few arguments. First, humans do everything for other reasons than animals. We eat and we have sex for reasons other than animals. we sometimes we eat because we're hungry, and sometimes we have sex to have kids, but a lot of the time we don't. So we don't do the same things for the same reasons as animals, and I don't see why changing your gender should be any different, changing your sex. Um, Also, I think there's a legitimate argument if you're talking about survival. If trans people being able to socially and medically or whatever they want to do transition actually does increase their survival. So, I mean, it does increase trans people's survival. I mean, and it does make them more likely to reproduce. So, like,
More likely to reproduce.
yeah, it's because they're alive. It makes them more likely to reproduce because they survive puberty and they survive, yeah.
Are people who go through sex changes ever fertile?
Yeah. That's why men can get pregnant. Yeah, you can, and keep in mind, dude, this could be like someone socially transitioning and not medically transitioning. There are all different types of transitions that people could go through. I don't know whether people can transition and get like a uterus installed or something. I don't know the current like medical state of things.
I don't think that's possible.
I don't think it is, and it doesn't matter to me. But like people can transition and still not have their reproductive functions completely change necessarily, depending on the type of transition they do.
Could we pause? Maybe I shouldn't go down this road, but I can't not.
It's whatever, yeah. And then we yeah.
Can men get pregnant?
Yeah, because someone being a man is a social category, so it doesn't even speak to what equipment they have.
You could maybe say it's a social category second, but first it's a sexual category.
Okay, but when you're saying can a man get pregnant, it's like there are people who you would see them and you would think that's a man, and they call themselves a man, and everybody around them calls themselves a man,
And
and
it's
they
possible you could be wrong.
it's possible I could
It's
be,
possible that you could be wrong based on your initial perception.
but there's no say there's you call them that and they call them that and everyone they know calls them that. So who's to say that they're wrong?
Their chromosomal information.
So I mean, it's just, but then there are people with chromosomes that don't match. Like,
Very, very few.
so then
But yes,
why would that be the thing? Who does that help to
it's
make
less
that?
accurate. Like our society is better off when we're as accurate as we can be with the information we're provided. It doesn't do anyone any services to confuse something like that.
So you think even though there are there are what am I trying to say? There are like cases that go against. You still think we should try to keep ourselves to a rigid, fixed
I
sort of.
think we should teach the rule, not the exception.
Why? Why teach either? Why not just like give people the ability to be who they are? And who does it hurt for it to say men get pregnant?
Maybe this is a stupid example, so I'm
Yeah.
sorry if I'm bringing it up. I'm thinking of it literally in the moment.
No,
But
yeah,
like,
no worries.
it's
Yeah.
possible that you could make a 3D hologram of a table that looks like a table from a distance. It looks like it's a wood grain,
Yeah.
but it can't hold stuff. That table behind you, it's a real table. I'm
Yeah.
assuming it's a real table and not a projection of a 3D hologram. It's useful for me to be able to assume that the way things present in the world will act as I think they will.
Right.
And it's possible that I'm wrong, but our brain is constantly operating based on assumptions about what will happen most of the time.
For
You
sure.
look both ways when you cross the street because you assume that there are going to be cars coming by. It's a useful heuristic. It's
For
a
sure.
heuristic, I guess.
For sure.
It's confusing to have people traverse the world using the exception.
I don't think people should. And I'm even like, I think it's fine to assume people's gender, and then when they tell you it's different, then just change. Like, I don't even think I'm not like a we shouldn't call kids pronouns. That's really fringe. I like almost no one thinks that. Like most people,
Can I ask you something?
yeah.
Why is gender an important distinction by which to characterize human beings?
That's a
Is
great.
it even something useful?
No, I don't think it is.
Like, I don't think gender identity, I feel kind of duped into like having it even be part of my vocabulary.
But
It doesn't seem useful.
everything I'm saying takes a
We
person.
agree.
No, everything I'm saying takes a person closer to gender not being useful. But everything you're saying
Interesting.
takes it closer to it being very useful. Because wait, and let
But
me say so.
wait. You said that men can get pregnant. That only exists in a world where gender is a key portion of someone's identity. If
No,
you're going based off of sex, that's not true at all.
I don't. When I say men can get pregnant, I'm actually not even saying the gender instead of the sex. I don't even really know the distinction. I don't think it's like a clear cut distinction between gender and sex. So I don't. People can change their sex. I believe it's not just gender. But
But if you change your sex, you aren't going to be able to perform the biological functions of the other sex.
so I wanted to speak to that because you're saying like we identify things using heuristics to understand how to interact with them and stuff like that, and I definitely get that. I think people have so many different functions. So to identify one reproductive function and say that that's the essential quality of a person that identifies them as that trait is arbitrary, I think, and I think it's maybe not fully arbitrary, but historically arbitrary and doesn't have to be that way forever. I think when I say men can get pregnant, I feel that I'm de-emphasizing gender and sex. I feel that I'm saying gender and sex don't matter because they're not relevant to whether someone can get pregnant. So I do believe that gender and sex are not something that necessarily we need to think about or have as fixed concepts. I think they can be interesting, but I think getting rid of the concept of gender and sex would be healthy. But I think that I'm going closer into that by saying they're not relevant for this. Like uh, yeah, it's just to me like it's a category that's in flux and doesn't need to be like rigidly defined by one quality like chromosomes when there are exceptions or giving birth when there are exceptions. Obviously, people, women who go through menopause don't do certain biological things that other people. It's like it's in flux based on your age, based on your body type, based on your culture. I think changes how you experience your gender and your sex. But yeah, I guess I'm
When we
probably
navigate the world, we need to have rules that are true most of the time
sure.
and can have exceptions.
Like, give me an example of
It,
what rule though. Like, are we talking about?
language, like when someone teaches you how to speak a language,
Yeah,
there are absolutely rules that can be violated,
for
but
sure.
you learn the rule and then you can also learn that the exception exists. But when you're teaching someone English, you don't teach them the exception exists in the same context of here's the rule. It's like day
Okay.
one, lesson one is like, here's the rule, how to speak English. Oh,
Okay.
by the way, for the advanced English user, here are some really nuanced things that you might come across
For
later on.
sure. For sure. I think that's fine, but we're not on day one. You know what I mean? Like,
Some people, children are, right? Like
okay. And I think
people who are like 7 years old
so. Do you
need
have
to
a?
know the rule first. And then
Yeah.
maybe when they're like 25, you could start telling them, like, oh, by the way, there's like a subset of people who
Okay.
don't subscribe to this at all.
You
This
know the
doesn't.
problem with that though. Kids have to know that trans people exist because they're the ones that they have to make sure that if they constantly feel like like a girl when they been told they're a boy, they have to know that they're not crazy and that that's something that actually exists. So I don't think, dude, obviously I don't think a teacher should be like you're all trans, like but like I think kids need to know trans people exist. They need to know gay people exist, straight people exist. I think it's fine to. Would you be okay with teachers say to kids, "Hey, most people are either boy or girl, but some people are non-binary, and some people are changed from being a boy to a girl." Or do you think that's bad in some way?
What subject is that teacher teaching?
I don't know, health or social. I don't know what they call the subjects nowadays. Health, probably. Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't think
So
it's a good idea.
okay, why?
I think that introducing more uncertainty about the way our society works, the way people grow up, uncertainty is less helpful to a child. Structure is more helpful. I think that if you give clear guidelines, it's the same reason that kids, as a Definitely a bad analogy. But when you're a kid and you go bowling, you put bumpers up on the sides because it's not clear to you how to stay within the lines. It's an analogy. It works,
No,
but
no, but
it's
like,
not perfect.
but you still take them bowling, and you still then there's uncertainty. They could drop the ball on their foot. They could, fall down, and like you expose kids to tolerable amounts of uncertainty in doses to get them ready for it. So you don't have to say to a kid, "You're not sure about your gender," but you can say, "Hey, this is something that exists." And maybe there's like a chill way to say it. I'm not,
There's an age appropriate way to say everything,
There's
I
an
think.
age appropriate way to say everything. I totally agree.
What
Yeah.
really creates such a visceral response that I know that you see in a lot of people that don't agree with you about this is people seeing what does not look like an age appropriate way to describe this. I think if you were to tell like an 8-year-old, like they point to someone and they go, "Why does that man look funny, mommy?"
Yeah.
I think explaining the details of what a sex transition might look like medically, what it could entail, what
Right.
like all of the deep statistics, I guess, underlying people's mental health
Yeah.
surrounding that, not appropriate.
And
But
you
if you said
think,
something like, "What?"
well, no, no, please finish. Yeah.
I was gonna say, but saying something to the effect of
Yeah.
some people are not as sure about falling into what you would think of when you see mommy or daddy, and they feel better describing themselves this way.
Sure. Or
I
some
think
people.
is different.
So you don't think that we should portray it as an identity, it sounds like. Like you think there's something bad about
I
saying,
truly see it as a mental illness. I know that we disagree about that, but I
and
do.
I'm the mental health professional.
You are.
I mean,
You're not every mental health professional, but you are a mental health
have
professional.
you ever heard a mental health professional describe being trans as a mental illness?
Yeah, the DSM-5, sure.
The DSM-5 does not describe being trans as a mental illness, dude.
Sorry, 4, DSM-4, the previous iteration.
Are you sure?
Pretty sure. I think it was like 2015 when they took it away.
You're not talking about gender dysphoria. You're talking about being trans?
Is gender dysphoria not an extension of being trans?
Correct. They are separate.
Tell me the difference then.
The difference is gender dysphoria is a mental health issue where you feel unable to live your life, you can't do things,
Hmm.
you can't function. That is something that people can feel regardless of being cis or trans.
Okay.
That's feeling like you are disconnected from your gender or like the performance feels impossible. Being trans, you can experience gender dysphoria or you can not. You can
Hmm.
not necessarily experience gender dysphoria at various times in your transition. It's you would still be trans. It doesn't you don't become trans because you this is something trans people talk about all the time.
It's interesting that you draw such a clear
Yeah.
binary between these two different modalities.
They're not on the same level. Being trans is not like gender dysphoria. I'm trying to think of a good analogy. Like don't you think a cisgender man who like doesn't feel masculine enough and does a bunch of things to feel more masculine is trying to like improve their gender performance, right? And like feel more in line with their gender. And that could be healthy and good, but it could also be toxic. In like, fringe examples, people could like hurt themselves trying to be their gender, or it could cause more problems in their life, or they could be like, I can't even function because I don't feel like a man enough. That would be experiencing gender dysphoria. You could also have a trans person who doesn't have that. They just are they are the other thing, and they want to be that. And they want everyone to call them that. But they maybe don't have the inability to function that would, be described as gender dysphoria. So
In order for Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
does that make sense? Because that's a very important distinction for sure.
In order for you to become trans, don't you have to have experienced gender dysphoria at some point to think that you should be a different gender than the one that you were assigned at birth? Quote.
No, because gender dysphoria is a category that is not just from it's not just from like that fact. It's from the inability to function in your life from that fact. So it's like you wouldn't be an addict just because you've done drugs. Like this person, wanting to, identify as something else, and identifying as that doesn't necessarily mean you have to experience like significant distress that impedes your life from your from your birth sex. Does that make sense? It could be you could know that, oh no, I don't identify as this birth sex, but that doesn't have to necessarily make it impossible to live your life as that birth sex.
You asked me, does this make sense? I'm not being
So
cheeky or
so someone
dismissive. It really doesn't make sense. I'm
I mean,
trying to
like if
understand it
you
from your
look up
perspective.
the something like gender dysphoria is defined by several criteria. So we could look it up, but it's not like being trans is not it's not sufficient. It's not even necessary is what I'm trying to say. It's not necessary or sufficient because if you're trans, that doesn't mean that it's impossible for you to live your life and you can't function as in your biological sex. You could be it doesn't have to be like your life is torture as your biological sex. And you know what I mean? You could still be trans and say, "Oh, I'm not my biological sex." But life's not necessarily torture. I'm not unable to function as the biological sex. It's different for different people.
And when you say being trans, are you referring to someone that has either socially or medically transitioned?
No, just mentally. Like just someone who's like, I'm trans. Like I know I'm not. Like say I've always felt like a girl, but I'm able to live as a boy. And I'm like, it's not like I am unable to function. It's not like I, cannot do things, but I know that's not me.
Okay.
So that would be
For
someone who's trans but not experiencing gender dysphoria.
my interpretation of that is anyone who has convinced themselves that their biological write up is an incorrect expression of the biology that they feel like they are is going through, in order to bridge that chasm, you are experiencing a mental illness.
So what you're doing is circular logic because you're saying being trans is a mental disorder.
So are you though. I mean, in your initial precept, you're saying that someone can be born a biological male, experience they're trans in their head, and they're
Yeah,
saying I am a female, I present as a female,
yeah,
it's not causing me a problem, but I'm presenting as a female. But in doing so, you're not telling me what exactly a female even is. You're not giving me some sort of framework to say this is clearly what a female is, this is clearly what a male is. I'm experiencing life as this, I know I am this,
yeah.
but I'm not having some sort of disjointed dysphoria. You can't say I feel like a woman, but I was born and assigned a man without giving me a clear, distinct definition of what a man is and what a woman is.
I guess. I mean,
Otherwise, what does it mean to say that I'm identifying as this? What are you identifying as
what does it
precisely?
mean when you say that you're a man? It means the same
I'm
amount.
happy to give a lengthy definition, but I wouldn't mind if you answered that one first,
Well,
because
I
I
guess
think that your initial concept is circular.
it's circular because I don't think there's a clear definition of what it means to be the genders. Because I was saying that what you were saying seemed circular because it was like the it you're, being trans is a mental disorder by virtue of if you by virtue of I've defined mental disorders as something that encompasses being trans, which is just like that's not we don't define mental disorders that way. Like something's not a mental disorder because it's in contrast with your biology.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Often, well, I guess the way that we normally, the threshold that we define a mental disorder within the framework of is like, is it impacting your life? I know there's like a very clear checklist
Yeah,
of
that's why it's a
things that mental health,
disorder. Yeah.
yeah, like is it interfering with normal daily
Yeah.
activities? I guess this is often how addiction is
Yeah,
characterized as opposed
exactly.
to like
That's why I
habits
drink
that people
I,
have.
I drink coffee several times a day and I need it, but it's not an addiction because it doesn't hurt my life. You know what I mean? Except in
Still, I
small ways.
mean, it's still an addiction though. I
I
mean,
would say it's a
physiologically it is. It's just not mental health
Well, I would
addiction.
say it's a more of a dependence than an addiction, but I don't mean that to be semantics. I think it's useful to understand when something actually causes problems in your life. You know, I I don't know. I mean, if you're going against the modern authority of viewing a subject, I feel like you need like a solid reason for that when the whole like medical and mental health world has moved on from saying being gay
That's
is.
such a weak argument.
I think
That's
you're appealing
the
to an old
appeal to the
authority.
authority.
You're appealing
Wait,
to an
that's what you're doing.
but you're appealing to an older authority. You're selectively appealing to authority. You're appealing to past authority instead of even the updated
I
one.
say, I'm not trying to, I'm simply trying to discredit your appeal to authority by saying that there was an older one that disagreed with you and that I'm just trying to use that as a
Okay,
way to
but
neutralize your appeal to
I
authority.
don't think
I
I
would prefer to
need
just use first principles if I could.
but the appeal to authority that I'm doing is like it's not I don't see it as an appeal to authority because all these authorities are studying the issue in depth and I'm not trying to just have you rely on hey cuz the medical establishment says this. I think I'm also, pretty clearly trying to explain the logic as well. Why, I'm trying to explain to you very like concrete things like dysphoria is about your gender. It's not about whether you're cis or trans. It's about your gender. So like a man who feels like he needs to be more buff, the Liver King, dude, experiences gender dysphoria, clearly. Like he clearly does not feel like a man enough.
Just experiences a lot of steroid use.
No, but if we can take his word for it, he feels like he's never strong enough, even regardless of
I
how.
would argue any bodybuilder probably experiences some semblance of body dysmorphia,
And
similar
then
to how
there's
someone with
dysmorphia
anorexia.
too, which is
What?
separate. But fair enough, but that's a problem, and it's separate from being cis or trans. Is my point. So like, it's if your original argument for something like this being a mental disorder is that it's like you brought up gender dysphoria because you're saying like that's what makes it a mental health issue. But like that's not what it is to be trans. That's a mental health issue that people who are trans might experience significantly more. So it's just I guess I'm just trying to say like there's a difference between that and being trans. And if you can see that, I think it would help to to see why there's a difference between the identity and like symptoms of a mental disorder that can be common for that
So
identity.
I understand the distinction that you're drawing. I don't agree with it. And I don't agree with it just because, quote, the entire authority of medical health professionals who study this agree with it.
Why
I
don't
think that
you?
medical health professionals and the apparatus within can be wrong and are wrong all the time. I think that it exists with respect to COVID. I think the
So
WHO can be
so
wrong. I
so
think the
but
CDC
but
can be
but
wrong.
but why do you I get that that's not enough, but why don't you agree with what I'm saying about the separation of dysphoria and
Okay. I think the best way to probably describe this is with a series of analogies, and I think I'm consistent here. Someone who is a bodybuilder and thinks that they are small, thinks that they aren't big enough, and they look like a gigantic Ronnie Coleman type figure, that person, this is my interpretation of it. I'm not sure if this jives with the medical apparatus or not, is experiencing a sense of body dysmorphia that may not be considered a mental health problem because maybe it's not getting in the way of them being able to perform their regular daily responsibilities. It's not getting in the way of their physical health, not making them at a higher risk for killing them. That like all of these different, I guess, objective
Mhm.
metrics would say it's not a mental health disorder. But from my perspective, it is. When someone's sense of self disagrees with a third party's view of reality or like a third party consensus review of reality, to me, that's a mental disorder.
Can I say for a second, dysphoria and dysmorphia are different, and I actually think it's a worthwhile difference. That it's interesting that we're using them both because what you're talking about is dysmorphia, and that
I
is
did use that wrong. You're right.
no, you're using it right. You're actually using it
I
right.
think I said dysphoria. I don't think I
Uh,
said
I
dysmorphia.
think you said dysmorphia and you described dysmorphia. I
Okay.
think yeah, you did because like, someone think like if I think I'm extremely overweight and I'm constantly checking and I'm constant it's like really hurting my life. that is dysmorphia. My image of myself is out of line with others. Dysphoria is, being extremely dysphoric, extremely unhappy with yourself. And they can go together, for sure. But like you're saying, someone who, even if they didn't meet the criteria of a mental health issue, if they view themselves, like even if it's not like ruining their life or whatever, if they view themselves differently from how like some sort of fair-minded observer would view them, then that's inherently a mental health issue, is sort of what you're saying, right?
Probably a mental health issue. I mean, a lot of these things are subjective, but the best we can go off of is like, what would most people say? Because
So,
our perception of reality is ultimately very subjective.
so does it just matter on whether trans people pass or not? Like that's the
Say again.
like whether they pass or not? Like that's the factor that's important on whether they have a mental health issue because if they pass, then no, then their view is in line with everybody else's.
I, I don't think that's the argument I was trying to make.
But okay, yeah, I
I,
thought
I
it's
was I
yeah.
was originally saying I was taking exception to when we were talking about circular logic for a second there. You're saying someone can not be considered as having a mental disorder if they are trans. Just by virtue of being trans, it's not necessarily a mental
Of
disorder. You could
course.
potentially be born a biological male with XY chromosomes, believe you're a woman, and if that's not causing you some sort of everyday strife, you could be considered not having a mental disorder.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that interpretation, but I still was asking for and want you to describe, what does that mean for someone to be born a man but feel like they are a woman? What does that actually mean? Does it mean that they feel feminine? Does it, what
Yeah.
is
It means they feel feminine. I mean, I'm happy to try to speak to that. I'm not trans. I mean, yeah, it's like that gets into the blurriness of these categories themselves. I mean, I
it's
like
so blurry that it's not a useful distinction for me. The only useful distinction is the one that you can verify with provable data,
but,
your chromosomal DNA.
but like yeah, to finish up that point we were making, okay, chromosomal DNA, but we don't know that in most situations. That's not helpful when we're making a sports team.
You do know that in most situations.
So
That's
do
what I'm
you
saying. It's
think
like a
sports
useful
teams
heuristic to look at someone and go, you're probably a man.
But then what I'm trying to say by passing is like it seems like your reasoning relies on whether they pass or
I,
not.
I guess. I
But that
guess it
seems
is. I'm not
silly
sure.
because if a fair-minded person would not realize this person is trans and like that's what determines whether the trans person has a mental illness, like that's wild. Like no, of course because you could like
No, I think they have a mental illness if they think that they are a woman and they were born a man.
and that's
I don't.
you making these categories more real than I am. So if you're saying you're wanting these categories, you're wanting gender and sex to not be such a big part of our life, I'm trying to point out something like this does reinforce these binaries.
See what you're saying, and I don't think it's really a necessary distinction for adults. But as we get on every time, and I think talked about briefly, it's a useful thing to talk about with respect to children because, as you said before, it would be appropriate for a teacher. Correct me if I'm misrepresenting your
Sure, yeah,
viewpoint, but it
yeah.
would be appropriate for a teacher to say, not everyone fits into this binary. It's okay to feel different as a different gender
Yeah.
than what you were born as a sex in. And I think
Yeah.
that does legitimate, verifiable harm to human beings
What
to
would
teach
be
people that.
evidence you could find that would change your mind about that? What would
And
there
that's a hard one for sure. I would say if you could somehow prove to me that overall mental health outcomes for human beings on the aggregate are better when you teach them that. Like you'd have to study I would say this type of evidence. You
yeah.
study 10,000 children and you're able to like do a control where you don't tell them this and you
Yeah.
do tell them this in a different scenario and you
Yeah.
look at those two groups of children, how they grew up in the same society, which
Yeah.
obviously has a big impact, and you look at the children who you said early on these lines are really blurred, and you look at the other ones and you say these lines are very structured and
Yeah.
fixed. There are some very minor exceptions, but these are fixed. And you look at how those two groups grow up and you look at like, did they raise stable families? Were they able to hold jobs stably? Were they happy? Did they feel fulfilled? And I think that you're going to find that the group that is given a more rigid structure has a much better outcome. So I would say that kind of study, which is really hard to do,
Well, yeah.
would change my mind.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean that's what I figured. That's what I hoped you would say because that's what came to mind for me. It's like that's the only thing I can think of as like a good argument against it. Is like, yeah, if you could somehow prove that like self harm, suicide was decreased by teaching children some people identify as non binary or trans or both, you know that would be something that we'd all want. Obviously, we want the world to be better, and so given that you could never do the study you just described, right? That's
It's not feasible.
not at all feasible for many reasons. It takes way too long, and
It's not feasible.
the metrics are too complicated. I would encourage you to think about what is an actual more realistic thing because I guarantee you people do study this. And so how do scientists go about proving oh this actually damages mental health impacts? Cuz I would say you're creating inherent stigma by having fixed categories. Because look at this. Like I don't want to just wash away your question of like what do these categories even mean? I get that that's like an interesting question. I think when you try to start answering it, you realize there are always exceptions, of course, right? There are always you could describe any sort of masculine qualities and there are men who don't have those qualities. And same with women and stuff. So like if we're portraying these categories as fixed, we're not just talking about you have to be your biological sex. We're talking about you have to be that and do certain actions and act and be a certain way. And I think that does harm to everybody, regardless of cis or trans.
What are some harmful activities that you encourage people to do based on their biological sex?
I think that men are encouraged to be aggressive, boys are encouraged to be aggressive. I think women are encouraged to be passive. I think that's really harmful. I mean,
You think that there's like a natural component to that, or that's entirely
I,
societal,
I
or a
think
mix?
I'm sure there are definitely differences. The brains are different. There are differences. I'm sure there are natural components to it for sure. I do. I mean, I don't want to just guess, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to say which is more, but there's certainly social characteristics, social components of that as well. I would assume, you obviously agree. Maybe we differ on what proportion we think they are. But regardless, I don't think people should be coerced into performing behaviors, even if we think it's good for them down the line. I mean, I think their identity is more serious. You make a kid brush their teeth, yeah, whether or not they want to, but I don't think you can tell someone who they are, and say, well, it'll help you out down the line. And I think that goes for cisgender people as well. And I know you've been in this position, as I have, we all have, where someone wants you to be a different type of man or something like that. And it's like, I think that's really harmful. So I guess all I'm trying to say, like, I know we don't
There
have.
was one. I'll tell you a personal anecdote in just a second. I haven't told many people this, but
I think
and
you might have told. I feel like I have to be honest. I think you might have actually told me, and that's
you're
how
you
I.
know what? You're right. I have told you this. I'm not going to tell it
And
again.
that's
You're
why
right.
it's on my mind. But I really do. Just
So I
like
agree with that aspect of it,
I think
but
I'm trying to say they're intertwined. I think you can't have.
you, I think you're deeply understating the biological aspect of it. The
I
entire like growth process that you underwent when you were in utero was dictated by this symphony of hormones and biological
I
impulses.
agree. Of course, of course.
And men, biological men,
Yeah,
per, women produce like 5 to 10% of the amount of testosterone that men have. That's a humongous difference that has a gigantic impact on things like aggression.
for sure, for sure.
We can't just throw the baby out with the
I
bathwater
don't,
by saying, okay,
I don't mean to. I guess it's like, but in those, like, what am I trying to say? I guess, yeah, there are obviously natural differences, but does it help us to reinforce those natural differences or to just like not put too much pressure on it one way or the other? I would
I
say
th- I
that,
think
yeah,
there's a delicate balance to be
yeah,
had where this is like the whole idea of it's okay if girls want to play with trucks, it's
Yeah.
okay if boys want to wear dresses,
Yeah.
but also it's good to have natural boundaries within our society, and more reverse the less reversible the type of change that a child wants to make, the less encouraging you should be of it. So like an interest in a toy is zero long-term impact, fully reversible.
Sure.
It just doesn't matter long term.
The problem with that, I just want to interrupt because the problem is that it is a risk reward thing. You have to
Absolutely.
you have to balance the
Absolutely.
reward, so you have to take into account. Okay, first of all, dude, I mean, do you know that puberty blockers are reversible? Like,
I know that they are purported to be reversible by their advocates.
okay,
Um, there's no amount of, how do I put it? It doesn't follow basic physical principles of how your body undergoes puberty. The amount of testosterone present in your system as you undergo puberty makes a humongous impact on how your body changes.
yeah,
And the timing of when that cacophony happens also has a huge impact on things like bone density and height.
right.
Makes a colossal difference. It
I
just
would
doesn't make any sense based on any physical principle that using puberty blockers, introducing hormonal changes to your body, are fully reversible. That's like thinking that we just discovered some of the tools in God's toolkit. I'm not a believer in God, but we just
yeah.
discovered a couple of the tools and we're like, this is fine. Like there's no repercussions to this.
But that's for everything. And like just to be clear, it is puberty blockers and then hormones. So the puberty blockers are the fully reversible part. Hormones are a little less fully reversible as far as I understand. And then obviously, medical things could be not reversible. But the important thing is to keep in mind is like cisgender indoctrination is also not reversible. So like it's
Like for you, you mean like you
no,
haven't
like
been
making a trans person go through puberty without being able to express their trans has irreversible consequences. So everything has irreversible consequences in this case, and so
okay?
and
I
so
agree with you that we should be trying to walk the line that has the best risk to reward ratio. I think at
sure.
the end of the day, we just totally disagree about which behavior we should be reinforcing to do the least harm and the most good.
But it's interesting that you also think gender is like talked about too much or like should be. I don't know how to
I don't think a
characterize.
teacher should be discussing that with a child.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean like you also believe that gender we make too much of a big deal out of gender and stuff, right?
I think we absolutely are if you make a statement like men can get pregnant.
Well, I would say that it's the statements like, boys have to be this way, men have to be this way, women have to be that way, that actually makes a big deal out of gender. Like,
Boys have to be this way, I think is
or
making a big deal out of
boys
gender. But
are
saying that
this way.
boys are overwhelmingly more likely to act a certain way based on their biological makeup is not making too big of a deal out of
Well,
gender.
let me ask, in those fringe cases where it's like, the chromosomes are different or like someone doesn't.
Intersex, you mean, for example? Or
Sure,
like,
sure, or whatever. Any of those fringe cases, do you still call them the thing that they are, even though they don't have the full thing? Like
I don't know what you're asking me
if you
exactly.
have a man with XX chromosome, that's not how it works. I forget what the one is. You can have like women with like I forget how it works, but there's if you have like a woman with the wrong chromosomes or something, do you still call them a woman? Like when you met that person, would you consider them a woman?
I don't know that I've ever been in this scenario, so I'm not sure that I would know, but I think that based on whatever the social situation called for, I'd probably be willing to put aside my specific beliefs about what I think is actually at play in the interest of a social interaction going smoothly.
But in
So
your
I'd
mind,
probably,
you would say they're not a woman if they had the wrong chromosomes. Everything else was the same. As far
what do you
as
mean everything else was the
like
same?
everything, they look like what you think a woman looks like. They act in feminine ways or whatever. Like, but you somehow
I'd
had
probably say a woman and I'd probably be wrong.
so you in your mind right now you think that person is not a woman. You genuinely think it's the chromosomes that make someone a woman.
I think it's the only thing that we could possibly refer to that's objectively verifiable.
I think it's
It's
the
like this is
yeah.
the good example. Like if I know maybe you feel like you have a good rebuttal to this,
No,
but
no,
like
no, please.
archaeologists a few hundred years from now dig up a bunch of like skeletons that are buried in a graveyard, and they see the skeleton, and they're doing like a
Yeah. Yeah,
autopsy or
I've
whatever
heard
the
this.
hell
Yeah,
you
yeah.
call it.
Yeah.
Brush off the bones, and they're like, based on like the hip size
Right.
and the orientation, like this was a man. And it's like you back up 200 years, and they're like, actually, like this person presented as a woman, felt like a woman. It's like that's not as objectively verifiable as something that you can look at, feel, touch, and measure with the scientific instruments that we have right now.
There's a there's a weird fantasy of objectivity that you have. And it's
I
like
think objectivity is a legitimately it's a good pursuit
I don't
to strive
understand.
for.
I don't understand why that's information. You have all this information over here of what makes someone their gender, right? And then you have like a performance. You're talking about how people act. I mean, and how like they behave, how they think and feel being different, right? Like how we exist in society is different based on our gender. There are so many things that are different, even chemically, things that archaeologists would never know. But like, why is it? And then this one factor has more objectivity to it than all the social stuff. I
Yes.
yeah, I guess I don't see why social relationships, when we're defining a category that you know has social sides to it, why those social aspects are just left out of the equation. I guess that's what I don't get. But
Social those social aspects are less objectively verifiable. They are less scientifically quantifiable than something like your DNA.
I don't know that scientific quantifiability is always the metric I view things by. Like, it doesn't seem like, okay, we're able to quantify this one facet of a thing. Does that mean that's the only facet that's important?
I
I
think
don't,
it's probably the most important, most likely.
I just think it's the one that's most quantifiable. I think you're looking for something concrete and quantifiable about a category that is inherently blurry.
I think it's
Like,
very quantifiable. I think that
yeah, it
you're
is. The
trying
thing
to
you're
look at it
finding.
through this lens that you want to wear. I think part of it is our life
I
experiences,
do,
our
yeah.
educational backgrounds that give us these perspectives to view these types of issues through. But I think one of them is more transient and less palpable. I think that's yours. And I think one of
Yeah.
them is more objectively verifiable and provable. That's mine.
And I guess I wonder if that does more harm in reality to more people. What what good is it? And like you go back to how people are talking to kids and so on. I would argue there's an enormous amount of right-wing propaganda about this subject that tries to make people feel like kids are being spoken to in some harmful way that I would argue is completely false. There might be some fringe cases, but I believe most people are just trying to help kids feel like, oh, if I'm not, if I don't fit into these categories perfectly for whatever reason, that's not something wrong with me. And I think that's a good thing. You might think, well, we could help those kids if we did make them feel like that was something wrong. But I disagree. I think empirically that causes more suffering. I think it causes more joy in the world to not try to look for some objective, facet for something like gender. Just like, something like happiness. Like I wouldn't want to boil down happiness to like one measurable objective thing. Because that would be so like that would create less of it. I think that would be more
I get what you're saying.
painful.
And
Yeah.
we're I guess at the point where we're trying to project what we think like the conversation about um, biology and gender, how that maps onto like the human condition writ large. And I think that based on my life experience, giving children a kind of structure to view themselves within the framework of does them more good than it does harm. And I think that you can be encouraging about giving flexibility within that framework without abolishing it entirely. And I think that the logical leaps that you are making in order to fit this ideology does abolish the verifiable truths that we're looking at. So by saying something like men can get pregnant, you're giving children an obliteration of what they can view and see with their own eyes.
I
And I
totally
think that
disagree.
that does more harm than good.
I totally disagree. I think getting rid of the structure would mean not using categories like men. I think when you say men can get pregnant, I think you are still using the same structure. I think I agree with your point that it's important to give structure, of course. And I think I feel like, when you say, but teaching that with flexibility, I don't know that I view that as totally honest, because if you also think that flexibility doesn't extend to like, and you can be something other than your birth sex, then I don't think that's flexibility.
I think that's lying. When I say flexibility, I mean like you don't have to be rigid about like girls need to like pink, boys need to like blue. I think that would be like an expression of extreme rigidity based on completely
Right.
arbitrary. And I think that flexibility, when I say that, I am being genuine about it. I mean, there's flexibility within preference. You don't have to like things that boys normally like. You don't have to like things that girls usually like. But it's a lie that you can tell yourself to make yourself feel better that girls don't usually prefer a certain type of thing. And there's a biological component to that that's overwhelming.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I
Men,
mean,
men, men are
yeah.
more aggressive because they have testosterone coursing through their veins at a factor of 10 or 20x that of women.
I think that does a disservice to men's free will. Because when I say aggressive, I mean the aggressive behaviors, and I don't think people's behaviors are driven, solely by their hormones. You have people like, when I say men are aggressive, I mean like doing aggressive things, and that
Can I
comes
ask
from,
then why
yeah.
do people who are going through a medical transition get hormone therapy? Isn't it enough to just declare that they are whatever they feel like? Why do they need to go and get the male hormone or the female hormone to transition if hormones have nothing to do with it?
Hormones have effects on your body, and they want, like, people
That's what
want,
I'm trying to say, like aggression.
but they don't have effects on, they don't make you who you are. And
They
yeah,
definitely do.
I'm sorry. I feel like we're talking past each other. I'm not saying, and we do have to stop actually soon. But I don't. Some people who are transitioning want to take hormones because they want the effects of those hormones. They want to have their body and they want to change themselves into that sex, and they
So
do.
those hormones do have an effect on you.
Of course. I'm
Like
sorry.
what?
Wasn't trying to imply people's hormones don't have any effect. I just mean, like, when you're talking about someone's aggression, to attribute it solely to their hormones seemed like weird, like taking away free will and taking away people's ability to make decisions about
When you
themselves.
look at the aggregate, I mean, we're like, I guess, conflating the aggregate versus an individual. If you look at the aggregate, on average, people who have a higher prevalence of testosterone, men, are going to be more aggressive than people who have less testosterone, women. That doesn't strip anyone of individual agency. It doesn't strip a parent of the ability to influence their child to make decisions with their biology that they're given. But it does make a true statement about the aggregate.
Right. I don't disagree. I guess I just, yeah, I don't. You have like, yeah, I'm not sure what to say. I don't know exactly what to respond
But
to. Like,
do you,
yeah.
do you have the same? So you asked me what would it take for me to change my mind, and I
Yeah.
told you what evidence I would need to see. Is yours pretty much the same thing?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the evidence is extremely clear that people's lives are improved by having more flexibility than what you're talking about. I genuinely think it helps everybody. I view this as a issue of freedom, and I know that you care about freedom. So it's interesting to me that this doesn't strike you as a freedom issue. Like, to me, this is very clear, a clear cut freedom issue. Freedom of
Tell me
express,
how.
like people being able to be who they want to be. The freedom
I
to,
didn't say anyone shouldn't be able to be who they don't want to be. I didn't say
okay,
anyone
sure.
shouldn't be able to.
Okay, but practically, if people are treating you like you're insane for identifying how you identify, it
That's not a
makes.
freedom issue. That's a freedom of expression issue to say that someone shouldn't be able to treat you like you're insane.
If you're against letting kids know that they can identify as trans, you're
Hmm.
restricting their freedom.
So children fall into a completely different category in terms of freedom.
What does that mean?
Children really don't have freedom. They don't have autonomy. They have like this sliding scale of increasing autonomy.
And I think this should be on that sliding scale. I think we should let kids figure out for themselves how they want to identify, just like they do figure out a lot of other stuff about themselves. I think that's a better world, and I think that kids deserve that. I think that's something
Oh,
they can do.
how much more time do I have with you? Do you have
Just
to
like
go? Is
just
that what you
like
said?
just like 5 minutes, probably. Yeah.
Do you remember going through puberty? Like, do you have
Yeah, sure.
a pretty clear recollection of it?
I wouldn't say I have clear memories of that time in my life, but sure, yeah.
So I recall it feeling uncertain and tumultuous in certain ways.
Yeah,
I think for me personally, it was relatively stable, but you get this like surge of hormones throughout, I don't know, maybe it's like 5 to 7 years or however long it
for
takes.
sure, yeah.
And it drastically changes your emotional profile, your feelings of like certainty about yourself, your feelings of comfortability within your own skin, your self conscious. There's
For
all these
sure.
different things that really everyone's experiencing throughout puberty. Like
For
no one
sure.
hits puberty and they're like, heck yeah, like I'm just
Yeah.
chilling. Like it throws this kind of big like curveball to everyone.
Yeah.
And you like try to ride the wave and arrive at the end of puberty in like comfortable in your own skin. And it generally doesn't end in like this nice, even way. There's
For
like
sure.
ups and downs. And I think that helping children navigate that time in their lives is one of the greatest goods we can do for our
For
society.
sure.
And I worry that by taking the guardrails off of the left and the right side of that experience opens children up to more harm than good.
I just think it's a total misunderstanding to say that we're taking the guardrails off. I think
That we're
it's
taking the what?
the
Say again.
guardrails off. I think that's a total, and that's just not how I see it. And I think a good like explanation of that is like the whole hubbub about who uses what bathroom. Should the guardrail be your gender, your sex, or should it be how you act around other people? We get all mad about trans people using whatever bathroom, but the real likelihood of any violence in a bathroom is going to be caused by a cisgender person. That's just a fact. Proportionally, not just statistically, but proportionally. So why are we not making as big of a deal about cisgender men, or cisgender women causing violence? Why do we make it about the trans stuff? And I believe that's our society looking at the wrong guardrails, basically having the lines in the wrong place. I think that I really think you can uh, accept trans people and their identities without viewing it as like having no structure at all. I think it's extremely fine for people to be very comfortable in their birth sex and their identity, but I don't think trans people's existence being valid takes away from the structure of society any more than gay people being able to get married, for instance. I think it takes away guardrails that probably shouldn't be there, in my opinion. But
I don't want to necessarily rehash everything that we already talked about, but I find myself wanting to
well,
poke
we
poke and
should
prod at things that you
we should
said.
talk more frequently because there's. I know we had other things we wanted to. I'd be down to talk a lot more frequently. I always say that, and then I'm bad about it. But we should do this more, dude, for sure. I mean, there's like so much detail and depth to get into. Like I know we didn't plan on talking about this at all. We were
No,
like
we
talking
didn't.
about free speech and then it goes into this. And I meant to bring it back to free speech, but there's just so much other stuff to talk about. But
What do if I ask? I mean, you probably know my stance on this better than most people, and I think I know your stance on it
yeah.
better than most people. Like just because we've talked about it for hours, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you think? What like key logical assumption do you think that I'm making, or like piece of information do you feel like I'm omitting from my perspective that's leading me to not see it the way that you do?
That's a great question. I guess it's like it seems to be the aspect of when I point out like, but there are fringe cases, and you say like, but we shouldn't like define it based on that. I guess I view fringe cases not that we should define things based on those fringe cases, but that we need to incorporate the
So
existence
our
of.
framework should
Yes,
include the fringe cases.
and I think you need to be able to
Okay.
explain, like if you need to be able to explain all of it. It doesn't have to all fit with the same rule, but you have to have explanations for it that fit under your understanding of
I feel
things.
like my English language analogy is really important though, because if you expand the framework of teaching someone English as a second language to say, oh, by the way, there's like basically no rules to this language because we break all of the ones that we instantiate.
Yeah,
So I guess we're just going to not teach you there are any
but
rules to speaking the
that's the
language.
jump. That's the jump. We're
Right
not
there.
we're not doing that. I agree that this is a
But when
great.
you say men can get pregnant, that is stripping away all of the
I
rules.
don't see it that way. I really don't. I genuinely
Like,
really don't.
if you say something like men can get pregnant, you have completely obliterated the definition of what a man is.
You've obliterated the biological essentialism. You've obliterated the fact that we're, considering this stuff just based on biology.
Am I a biological essentialist?
Yes,
I
I
think
think
so.
you are. And I think that goes into like what we were confused about with hormones, where like I agree with you that hormones play a huge factor. I just don't think they're the essential thing. I don't think chromosomes are the essential thing. I don't think there is an essential thing. Actually, that's probably the best answer to your question. I think essentialism seems to be what you're going into. Like, we can define these things based on this one quality, whereas I don't. But it's interesting because you clearly think this helps people, and I clearly think my thing helps people.
I just Googled it. I guess I am a biological essentialist. Yes. At
Okay.
the very least, I think we should start from the conversation from that position
I
and
agree,
then
dude.
look for room around it, like on the edges of it. But that's like the framework that I'm beginning the
Yeah,
conversation
dude, I
from.
think the language analogy is fine. And you think we shouldn't lie to kids. I think we shouldn't lie to kids either. It's just a question of what is lying. And so like I don't think we should push kids in either way, but I think like yeah, I think just it generally is more it's I guess we just define the truth of the matter like really differently, and it's really hard to get into because that gets into objectivity and like every question. Yeah.
What? So I think we should probably like allocate a full 3 hour podcast for this specific topic because
Yeah.
right now I feel like we've already talked. Like you brought up the bathroom thing, I brought
Yeah.
up an analogy for English, and I think that only now are we starting to get into like some of the underlying issues of like where specifically do we disagree.
It's so true, and we can try to like tackle it in a more constructive way. I'm always open to whatever, but we should just do this more in general because I really enjoyed talking with you, man. Especially, I feel like this is really like great to just hash all this stuff out, and let's do this every like 2 weeks or something. If you're down, I'd be down.
I can probably do that for the next like month
All
or
right,
two, and
let's
then I
make that
won't. I
work.
won't for a little
Well, this
for
has
a
been so
while.
much fun. Yeah. Um, any last
As
words
we get,
about how I'm right about everything, or no? Just kidding.
I'm still waiting for my question to be answered. What is that? What
What is
is
what?
what is a woman?
I mean,
I
I
don't know what
think
it
it's like
means.
asking what is happiness. I mean, I think it's like
The cumulative presence of serotonin, dopamine, and other positive chemicals in your mind, giving you the illusion of some sort of sensory experience that's positive.
what's positive. No, all right. Yeah, we'll start here next.
Something that reinforces a behavior, I think.
I don't know, man. We'll have to start here next time.
All right.
This has been awesome, man.
Yeah, I like talking to you,
I love talking to you, dude. Yeah.
even,
Hope I
even if I
what
don't agree.
yeah, even if I hope I wasn't too annoying, but we'll pick it up and we'll keep the conversation going.
Sounds good. Thanks, viewers. Bye.
Bye. Wait.